Well, welcome to Pierre Chretien. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah,
Chretien
yeah, that's good.
of the Atlantis Jazz Ensemble, who is a wonderful jazz group from Quebec, Canada. And I'm from Canada. Anyway, I discovered uh, your album when it came out. I've been listening to it for many years. It's one of my favorite jazz albums, and we'll talk more about it. But in this interview, we interview what I consider to be ordinary visionaries, people that are, ordinary people, but they have a skill, they have a vision, they want to do things, they want to make music or whatever it is they want to do. And Pierre and his band are definitely fit into that category. They just came out with a second album, the Celestial Suite, just recently, which is also great. And so I'm going to be interviewing some other great jazz musicians that I really love, and you get to be the first one. So welcome to the
Oh,
interview.
well, thanks for having me.
So the first question might put you on the spot a bit, but just think about it. What do you think makes you an ordinary visionary?
Oh gosh, uh, I'm a bit of a humble guy, so it's hard for me to answer questions like that. Um, I, I guess as a jazz musician, to take the plunge and do this full time, you really have to be driven. So I think it's the drive and the persistence that allows me to make music and put it out there. Uh,
Yeah, that's true of all musicians, but sometimes everybody's heard about jazz. There's jazz festivals all over the place. Everybody knows about a lot of old jazz albums like Kind of Blue and
mhm,
things by Coltrane, etc. But not a lot of people are tuned into the most recent jazz.
mhm.
And people don't realize that the jazz niche of the music marketplace is only about 2% of all the music or the money that comes in for jazz.
Right.
Although, I don't know if you have any idea how many jazz albums get released every year.
I'm sure it's a lot, but
It's,
yeah,
well, I buy over 100 jazz albums a year,
yeah,
sometimes 150, but
it's more than me.
it must be in the thousands,
Yeah,
seriously. And I swear some probably only sell two copies.
yeah. I think a lot of it's pretty forgettable too.
Yeah,
It's
and
just
even
like
if
it's,
it's good, it's hard to get the word out about there. So,
mhm.
yeah.
And jazz is always in competition with its past. It seems like old albums like Kind of Blue you mentioned consistently outsell new ones, right? So it's really there's a lot of weight there. The weight of history is a lot to take on.
I know that's interesting because let's see, what was rock and roll in 1959? What was coming out? Was it Bill
Yeah,
Haley and the Comets or something like
or
that?
Elvis Presley. Yeah,
Elvis Presley? And I suppose
but
Elvis still sells some, but not as much as kind of Blue sells in
I'm sure
in
Taylor Swift
relationship.
is outselling Elvis Presley these days, right?
Oh, for sure,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah, so it's a different kind of thing.
yeah.
And when you see the jazz albums, don't get me started, but when you look at the top jazz albums, the 10 whatever, they're all more than 50 years old.
Hmm.
And which is too bad because a lot of really great jazz is being put out today. Unfortunately, a lot of kind of mediocre jazz is being put out today, so it's kind of hard. But anyway.
Yeah.
So, tell me a bit about your journey. How did you get into being a jazz musician, forming the band, etc.?
Um, so I started out as a kid. I grew up. I was born in Sudbury, Ontario. That's in North Ontario,
Right.
and I, started taking piano lessons when I was 5 years old. And there were a lot of musicians in my family, and I had a few uncles that played jazz. So from a young age, I got used to big jams around the piano, and you know, uh, I remember being 5, 6 years old and being like, "Oh, I want to do that."
Yeah, that's
So
great. I didn't
yeah,
have
so
I didn't have that, so that's something it was almost organic. You
yeah,
inherited it, right? That's
definitely,
great.
definitely,
That's true of a
and
lot of musicians.
Yeah. So I took classical piano lessons for a good while also kind of teaching myself jazz, listening to albums and transcribing and figuring it out on my own.
Yeah.
And eventually I moved to Ottawa for school. Initially I was in engineering, and it wasn't my thing. And I ended up quitting after a little while and switching to music. So I ended up getting my my master's in theory and composition, but for classical music.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, I was starting up groups. I started the Soul Jazz Orchestra in 2002. Started up Atlantis in 2012 about, and I recently started up another project, Cinephonic, focusing on kind of cinematic jazz kind of stuff. And so that's basically been my journey.
Tell me what your jazz musical influences were. Who did you listen to, both old and new?
Early on, I was really attracted to guys like Thelonious Monk, McCoy Tyner was a big one, Bud Powell. The big obvious ones.
Sure.
I know a lot of guys, a lot of students seem to gravitate towards like Bill Evans and that kind of sound. But I was always
Who's
more
that again?
Bill Evans.
Oh yeah, Bill
I
Evans.
find every jazz piano student kind of sounds like Bill Evans, and the way they teach piano in school, they kind of teach you how to play like Bill Evans, like drop the root, drop the fifth, voice your chords like this. That was a little less my thing. Thelonious Monk was a big one for me, and McCoy Tyner, Bud Powell, Herbie Hancock a little bit, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's interesting. I have a lot of Bill Evans albums, but I don't listen to him too much.
I love him, but it's just not someone I sought out to emulate.
Right. I don't know if people listening to this know Thelonious Monk, but Thelonious Monk was one of a kind.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't write a lot of compositions. 73, 80 something compositions, something like that.
That's a fair amount.
They have a similarity to them, but they're very angular, and they have incredible rhythms to them, and they're really fun.
The harmony is just insane. I mean, he was just so ahead of everyone else when it came to that. Yeah.
He was like somehow mathematically inclined. Everything is just sort of exactly in the right place.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's a great influence to have for sure. So how did you had the thing called the Soul Jazz Orchestra?
Mm-hmm.
Tell me a little bit about that. How did that get started? An orchestra is not a small thing. It's a lot of moving parts.
We were called the Soul Jazz Orchestra, but we're actually a sextet, so 6 people, not so bad.
Okay.
With a lot of guests on albums and stuff. So
yeah,
but the sound sounds big,
Yeah.
It was a group that focused on soul jazz, but also funk, African music, Latin music, Caribbean music. Jazz based, but very dance floor friendly at the same time.
Right.
And it's a group that did quite well. In 2006, Giles Peterson named one of her tunes one of the top tunes of the year. So that really blew us up internationally.
Now, did the Soul Jazz Orchestra record?
Oh yeah, we put out 9 different albums.
How did I miss those?
I don't know. Most of them are on Strut Records in London, UK.
Are they on Bandcamp?
Yes, I think so.
Don't
control. I don't administer it myself. The label does.
Okay,
but it should be on Bandcamp.
Anyway, I'll check it out. I buy most of my music on Bandcamp if I can.
Mm-hmm.
So that's great.
Yeah. 9 albums. 3 were Juno nominated, so Canadian Grammys.
Wow.
Did quite well. Radio Nova in Paris, one of the big radio stations there, named one of her songs the top songs of 2007, like the number 1 song of the year. So that's when we started touring Europe quite a bit. So we did 20 European tours with that group, went to Africa, Latin
You did
America.
20 tours?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Africa?
Yeah, we went to the Ivory Coast, played in Abidjan. We've been all over the world, really, with that group.
Well, that's exciting. I really didn't know about that background for you guys. I mean, that the Atlantis Ensemble just came out of nowhere. I'd never heard of you. I listened to it and loved it.
Yeah.
So you were in that group for how many years?
Well, it started in 2002,
Yep.
and we went on hiatus in about 2020. So, 18 years, give or take.
So did you break up because of the pandemic or
Well,
are you on
I had been
hold and
at
you're
it.
going to go back again at some point, or you don't
Yeah,
know?
we're just on hiatus for now. I might pick up again, but we had been at it pretty hard and touring lots. Like we were living on the road for a while. So, it was time for a break.
Yeah.
And with
So
soul jazz too, uh, um, I guess we were getting paired up with a lot of like DJs or dance nights and that kind of thing. And after a while, I guess I wanted to explore a little more jazz oriented stuff. And I felt a lot of pressure to always make people dance, make people move. And,
right,
it kind of got pigeonholed a little bit. So I felt I couldn't do whatever I wanted to with that group, you know?
right.
Yeah.
What was it like being out on the road all the time? I mean,
Oh,
it's a hard, tricky lifestyle.
yeah. Especially I was always tour manager. So I'd book the hotels. I had booked the flights, the trains,
Wow.
the subways, and we do it all with public transportation. So all the guys would have their horns with them. I'd have my pedal board, and yeah, we'd hop on subways, taxis, trains, planes, and it was like months at a time of this. So it was really grueling. Mm.
Wow. But that builds a certain muscle, doesn't it, of persistence and getting your stuff together and being
Yeah,
at the date on time.
when you put that much effort into something, I mean, you're gonna live and die for your music. It really means a lot to you. It's not
Yeah.
spoon fed to you. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's hard to even imagine a lifestyle like that. In the last 20 years, I've been here working out of my office. I don't have a commute. I don't have anything. I'm just here,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
So, so how did the Atlantis Jazz Ensemble come to be?
Yeah. Well, like I mentioned, so soul jazz was getting more and more kind of dance floor oriented, and me and Zachary France, who's in Atlantis, is also in the Soul Jazz Orchestra. So both of us
Right.
wanted to kind of explore something more jazz oriented and more spiritual jazz oriented.
Yeah.
We touched a little bit on that with soul jazz, but on albums like Rising Sun and Inner Fire. But we wanted to do more and go deeper. So both of us recruited drummer Micah Sudri, bass player Alex Bilodeau, and trumpet player Ed Lister. And so we started up, that was 2012.
Yeah.
In the early days of Atlantis, too, I played exclusively vibraphone. I just picked up a vibraphone and I'm like, I want a band where I could just play vibes. But I didn't have the right pickups for it, and playing vibraphone acoustically, it's hard to compete with the full band going.
Right. Right.
So after a while, I switched to Rhodes and haven't looked back.
Right. So, yes, you mentioned spiritual jazz.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the interesting thing about jazz, people think jazz is jazz is jazz, but there's, 327 different categories or
Yeah,
subcategories.
right.
And what's your definition of soul jazz, or what's sort of the vibe or the feeling or the mood of soul jazz, of spiritual jazz?
Mm-hmm. Uh, yeah, it's music that uplifts the soul to me. Music that's like a catalyst to reach a higher place. And to me, it's usually somewhat repetitive, usually modal, and it's got a kind of a mantra feel to it.
Right,
And
right.
groove bass without being all out funky, usually.
Right. Yeah, it's got a nice. It's something that you can move to.
Yeah, but it's not
It
James
has
Brown funky. Yeah,
no. It has wonderful melodies.
yeah,
It's sort of mellow, but it's not simplistically mellow,
yeah,
right?
yeah, and yeah, and yeah. There's a kind of an elegant simplicity to it a lot of times, but yeah, but not easy listening. It's hard to explain in words sometimes.
Yeah, it, but it's very listenable. Well, spiritual jazz kind of maybe some of the first spiritual jazz records were by Coltrane.
Hmm.
Which one? Love Supreme,
Yeah.
and then it was picked up a lot by Pharaoh Sounders, people like that.
Hmm.
Of course, Coltrane went into the stratosphere.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
He sort of went beyond some of that stuff. And then, do you have any particular spiritual jazz other musicians that you follow these days?
You mean like modern guys or?
Yeah, modern guys.
Oh, we've played twice with Kamasi Washington. He's a big one. I like him a lot.
Yeah,
He's such a nice guy too. Super humble.
yeah,
Yeah, he actually we played with him in Montreal, and he actually handpicked us to play with him. So that was really nice.
that's great.
And Nat Burchell, I like a lot too over in
Oh,
the
me
UK.
too. Love
Yeah,
him.
yeah, yeah,
He puts out albums like clockwork.
yeah. I don't know how he
It's
does
just
it.
it's just every year or less or even more. He's got another one coming out soon.
Hmm.
Just released a second part of something. I mean, I've been listening to him since day one, since he first appeared on Matthew Halsall's first album.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And he's another one that's got some cool stuff, Matthew Halsall. Um, there's a
Do you know
new
Muriel
young.
Grossman?
Yes, yes, she's great. Yeah.
Yeah, she's
Uh,
from Austria.
oh, is that right? I thought she was living in Spain now. Maybe I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think she is living in Spain. Yeah.
Weather's nice.
Anyway, so when you conceived of the Atlantis Jazz Ensemble, and then the first album is called the Oceanic Suite,
Hmm.
it has a great cover. It look, it's a real. I don't know where that cover came from, but it's
It came from an old pseudo-scientific magazine.
ah
Some guy claimed to have found Atlantis, and he had all these elaborate diagrams and maps detailing where it was and what happened, and some, you know, it was all a scam. But I just love the artwork.
it's interesting.
Yeah.
You know, I was thinking about this last night. I'm I'm auditory oriented, but I'm very visual oriented. And if I don't like the look of an album, I often won't check it out.
Hmm.
It
I'm
just
the same.
it kind of looks boring. And I
Yeah.
look at all the albums that I like, and most of them have really covers that I really like.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. And I have a sense when I don't know if I'm nuts here, but that if a band is with it, they're going to get a good cover for their album. I mean,
Yeah.
that's important
Totally.
because that's a
Why
very.
I'm also a graphic designer. I'm an artist. I'm a visual artist. So
Oh, really?
I do all of our album covers. Yeah, I did most of the ones for Soul Jazz Orchestra, all the ones for Atlantis as well.
Yeah,
Hmm.
that's fantastic. So yeah, so tell me a little. Just tell us. It's hard to talk about music,
Hmm.
in terms of words. But just talk a little bit about your music and what you're trying to convey and what you're trying to do. And let me just you have a standard quintet where you've got a front line of a sax and a trumpet player,
Hmm.
same as Miles Davis's band.
Hmm.
The standard thing. You've got the keyboards, the bass, and the drums,
Yeah.
and that's the building blocks in which you do everything.
Hmm. Yeah, you
Um,
mentioned Miles Davis, like those late '60s albums of Miles, like "Vida Kilimanjaro" and "In a Silent Way." stuff.
Nefertiti, Sorcerer.
Yeah, well, the ones with the where he first started using the electric piano, the Rhodes, that was like Miles in the Sky, Feet of Kilimanjaro. That's kind of been
Oh yeah,
a big blueprint for our sound, also. Yeah.
yeah. I was a teenager when those came out. I started by buying. My first jazz album was Bitches Brew when I was 18 years old.
That's quite an
And I was
introduction.
into rock as a teenager,
Yeah,
and I listened to that, and it blew the top of my head off.
yeah,
Still my favorite album, believe it or not. And so, excuse me. And then I started to listen to other stuff by Miles. But anyway, so you were very influenced by that, the Feet of Kilimanjaro type stuff,
yeah,
like
big
that.
time. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. There's kind of a floating feel to that. I don't know how to describe it. It uh, it definitely is a step away from sort of the standard jazz language, which is hard
Yeah,
bop,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. I think the addition of the Fender Rhodes electric piano kind of adds to that too. It has such a floating sound, and the sustain it sustains like forever, whereas the piano
Yeah,
decays a lot quicker. So you tend
yeah,
to play a little more staccato and a little more aggressive, right?
yeah,
Uh, and you hear it in Miles's music, from Miles in the Sky to In a Silent Way. It got dreamier and dreamier and more soundscapey, you know?
yeah.
Uh, yeah. So I think just the choice of instruments kind of uh, gives direction to the sound. Funny enough.
Do you only play electric piano now, or sometimes piano as well?
Oh, I play a acoustic piano a lot too. I also play a vibraphone, uh, clavinet sometimes also. Yeah.
I better watch out about not putting my agenda into this too much. I just got a new vibes record by Jason Adasowitz called Roy's World.
Okay.
Check it out. It's incredible.
Yeah. Okay.
It's also a soundtrack of a movie. And
Cool.
he wrote the soundtrack before the movie was made.
Okay.
He said, we just want these moods. And he did these moods, and then they made the movie. It's sort of a documentary type of thing. Anyway,
Okay.
it's the kind of thing you might like.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
And the vibe playing is just extraordinary.
Oh, cool.
Anyway, tell me a little bit more about how did the album come together? How long did it take, et cetera, et cetera?
Our first album, Oceanic
Yeah,
Suite.
yeah.
Yeah, so I had written a bunch of tunes. Yeah, we jumped in the studio. We booked 3 days in the studio, and we played each song, I think, 4 times. And we picked the best take out of the 4. So we have a bunch of alternate takes in the vaults that might come out in 50 years when the best of comes out.
I'll be your first customer.
All right, sounds good.
Yeah, you see these things like Miles. Years after he died, they put out all that stuff from Bitches Brew, and
Yeah,
In a Silent Way, and Jack Johnson, and all those things. And some of it's pretty damn amazing.
yeah. Yeah, for sure. A few of we tried to fit everything onto a vinyl LP, so that's like 40 minutes worth of music. So we had to cut some of the ones we recorded, but some of them are pretty good. So maybe we'll put out an album of B-sides or something later on.
Right. So how did you get out there and promote it? You had an album. You'd had a lot of experience under your belt with the Soul Jazz Orchestra
Mm-hmm.
in terms of getting booked and stuff like that. So how did you? I'm a marketing guy. I was a marketing guy for 39 years, helping self-employed people get out there. And I know for jazz musicians, you're basically self-employed,
Yeah, definitely.
and you have to get out there and get booked and promote it. And what did you do to promote it? I mean, it became quite successful.
Yeah, I mean, I sent out CDs to every radio station in Canada.
Okay.
The ones I could think of, also in Europe and the US.
Yep.
And it ended up being number 2 on the charts that year for jazz, behind Bad Bad Not Good. So that's pretty cool for for a
What, in
debut album.
Canada or the U.S.?
In Canada.
In Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Well, number two is not bad, I'll tell you.
Yeah, definitely ahead of a lot of big names. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that must have been gratifying. So, did the airtime of the album help you get gigs, or you just tapped into your network and started to tour with that group?
Uh, we didn't tour extensively, but it did help us get a few high-profile gigs. We played with Kamasi Washington, for example. We also
Right.
got to open up for Anderson .Paak and at the Montreal Jazz Fest. That was a pretty big one. We got also a lot of airplay in France. FIP, Radio FIP, which is part of Radio France, gave us a lot of airplay. And what's the other one? TSF Jazz, the biggest jazz station in France. They gave us a lot of airplay too. So yeah. So yeah, it
Did
was
you
well
go to
received.
France and play?
Not with this group.
No.
With Soul Jazz Orchestra, just plenty, but not with this one so far.
Right. Okay. Then, so you put out the album. It was quite successful. You did a number of shows, and you play mostly locally now.
Yeah, I mean, I think I burnt myself out on the road. I'm kind of enjoying playing more locally, Ottawa, Gatineau. Yeah.
Are there many opportunities there?
Oh,
I mean, jazz clubs are not exactly expanding, it seems.
Yeah, especially since the pandemic, it really took the whole live music scene has really taken a hit. A lot of our favorite places closed down, and yeah, but things are picking up again. I'd say slowly. Yeah,
I hope so. So then you said your drummer left the band, and that kind of took a hit. And
the bass player.
Oh, the bass player. Sorry.
Yeah.
So you went on hiatus for a while after that, right?
Yeah. Our bass player Alex Bilodeau moved to Boston, and he was studying with Dave Holland and Cecil McBee, and big names like that, right? So, and he stayed out there. He's living in Austin, Texas now. He never looked back.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And Ottawa doesn't have a ton of great double bass players. So, yeah, it was great when Chris Pond came into town. He's in his early 20s, young kid. He's just graduated from St. FX in Nova Scotia, and he's originally from Newfoundland. So
right.
Yeah, it was great having him around. And
how did you bump into him?
What's that?
How did you bump into him?
I guess through Jazz Open Jams. We have a few of those in town, and we got to play. We played a couple of standards together at an open jam, and got to talking, and he was in.
So he must be pretty good if he's pretty young.
Mm-hmm. He is very good, though. Great sense of rhythm, good groove, which is a huge part of it.
Yeah, that's a big key. So, it's funny. I was thinking of you guys. I think, when is another album going to come out? And the next week, I got the announcement for the Celestial Suite.
That's funny.
So how long did you work on that?
Not too long. It had been maybe a year in the making. We got a residency playing. It started during the pandemic. We were doing more outdoor shows to avoid contact.
Right.
So we got a gig playing every weekend out in the streets on Somerset Street in downtown Ottawa. And I started writing new tunes, and I ended up writing the whole Celestial Suite, and we were playing him week after week. So the band got pretty solid.
Right.
So the fall after, we went into the studio, and this time it was just 2 days. We did a couple takes of each tune, and just live off the floor, and that was it.
Well, great. So what's the reception to that album been?
Better than the first. It's been incredible, really. This one's, and a lot of it's been word of mouth. I
Yeah.
don't know. It's been selling really well. I pressed 500 vinyls, vinyl LPs,
Wow.
and they sold out within a month. So I had to repress quickly. As I pushed the company to get as many as I could, and I've got another 500, and those are going pretty quick too. So I don't know. It's been funny.
Are you selling CDs as well?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Not
Somehow
CDs don't sell as well as they used to, but they still move.
I know. I mean, the music industry is really gone through a lot of changes in the last few years and everybody's streaming on Apple Music and Spotify, and you don't make a lot of money that way.
No, definitely.
I don't know. Things have got to change. It's just, I don't think Spotify has ever been profitable either. It's kind of crazy.
It's a long story, but
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
The big major labels are to blame for that.
Yeah. Well, if you're Taylor Swift, you're making money.
Yeah.
It's a whole different thing. She fills auditoriums.
The major labels all had shares in Spotify, and when it was time for Spotify to go public, they negotiated the lowest rate possible so that the share prices could be as high as possible. So that's why all the artists ended up getting screwed in that whole deal.
Yeah. So what can you do? Right?
Yeah.
But I'm kind of mystified with the rise of vinyl. I haven't had a turntable in over 20 years. I have a couple hundred vinyl albums in my basement.
Right.
And then I went to CDs, and now I'm all digital. Everything is on my MacBook Pro, and then I export it to my iPad and my iPhone and stuff like that, and works for me. But
yeah, personally, I really love vinyl. I find I just connect with an album so much more when you're putting it on physically. You're looking at the artwork in your hands, and
I know.
Just
I remember those days.
Yeah,
I remember those.
The first time you put Bitches Brew on the turntable, it's just such an experience, right? That clicking on the MacBook is the same. I don't know.
Well, I love the music so much. I listen to it all the time. I play it. I've got a good sound system here in my office, and I have a little one in my bedroom, and etc.
I'm not one. Whatever works for you, right?
Yeah. Well, it's different, with streaming and digital. People can create playlists. It's like I have literally hundreds of playlists. So I have a playlist for every musician, playlist for every year. It's just crazy. And so it's like you have your own private radio station, or I have all these private jazz stations. Oh, I want to listen to Miles Davis today, or whoever.
Yeah.
So that's kind of wonderful. But yeah, I remember just listening to Bitches Brew, over and over and over and over again. And then, of course, I started to get into all the musicians that played with Miles Davis, Chick Corea and John McLaughlin and Herbie Hancock and, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
It just expanded.
Yeah.
And then I got into all the old stuff and bought every Blue Note album I could get my hands on.
Yeah.
It's an obsession. But I'm sure I listen to more albums than the average musician does. They're spending more time playing than...
Yeah. A lot of times my ears are destroyed from concerts and stuff, so I don't actually listen to a whole lot of music these days.
Yeah. Well, that's fine. You don't need to. I mean, I kind of envy you being in the moment playing the music.
Right. Yeah.
I watch a fair amount of live music. We have a great little jazz club here in Santa Cruz called the Quamba Jazz Center.
Okay, cool.
When we've had people from all over the world come, top musicians. So
yeah.
If you ever do a tour down here, I'll be the first to buy.
We'll definitely hit you up for sure.
The first to buy a ticket. So what's your tell me a little bit about, what is it like being a full-time jazz musician? Hey, maybe you don't have a heck of a lot else to compare it to, but what is it like to be a working musician and creating music and playing music all the
Yeah,
time?
the thing people don't always realize is that the music making is actually a very small part of it all. A lot of it ends up being doing things you don't always want to be doing. A lot of clerical work, a lot of administrative work, promotion, marketing,
Right.
booking shows. That's a big part of it all.
Yeah.
And you have to be very disciplined because I don't have a boss telling me you need to do this, you need to do that. So,
Yeah.
and it's very important not to let the creative side, go. It's important to make time for the creative stuff. So I really try to set aside a little bit of time each morning to compose before I open up my emails and start doing the yucky stuff. But
The yucky stuff. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I help self-employed people for years. The same story. It's like, well, I want to be delivering my workshop or doing coaching or something like that, but I have to market and all these things. So
Mm-hmm.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
You have to figure a way to love it all, enjoy it all
Exactly.
somehow.
Yeah.
But is that a discipline of yours to try to compose a little bit every morning?
I try to as much as possible. Yeah.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's easy to just ignore that whole part of it and just
I
get
know.
caught up in other things, right?
Yeah, and you kind of lose your soul that way. I try to write almost every day.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
So, just sit down and put my thoughts to the computer, and so
Mm-hmm.
similar kind of thing.
Yeah.
So when you're writing, are you thinking of the next album?
Yes and no. But I always have, the next album in mind. But at the same time, I try not to censor myself too much. I read an article one time and it said you should be writing more bad songs. And I thought, what does this mean? But they were just saying, get the ideas out there and sort it out later. Don't censor yourself too quickly, because otherwise nothing's going to come out, So I just try to write, and then kind of sort it out. Okay, this is good. This is bad. This needs work,
Yeah,
that kind of thing.
I can totally relate to that.
Mm-hmm.
I did a newsletter every week for 25 years. So every Monday I would write an article,
Mm-hmm.
and I'd edit it that day, and then I'd send it out, and it'd go out on Tuesday, and but it was a great discipline to put it out. And then when I retired last August, I said, I got to keep writing. I'll just change the topic.
Yeah, totally.
And I don't have any grand. Go ahead.
Yeah, if you wait for divine inspiration to come down from heaven, you might wait a long time and not get anything done, Sometimes you just
I
got to
think
do
that's an issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, that makes you a true ordinary visionary. It's like you have ideas. You don't say someday I'll come up with a grand opus that 20 million people will listen to. I mean, that's fantasy.
Totally. Yeah.
And a lot of people are living in their dreams instead of what can I do now? And look at what you've done. You've had two very successful bands, and we don't know what the future is going to be. Who knows?
Exactly.
Your next album might be better. It might be a flop. Who knows?
Totally.
I'm sure it won't be, but yeah. So that's interesting. How often does the group get together and play or rehearse or perform?
Very little. That's the great thing when you have really top-notch musicians. A lot of times I can just show up at the gig, give them the sheet music. Here you go. It goes a little like this, and we'll often just kind of learn on the fly kind of thing.
Right.
These guys are all top-notch musicians, so we can kind of pull that off. We have maybe one or two rehearsals a year. Before an album, definitely rehearse at
That's
least
it,
once.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
Wow. So do they have other gigs?
Oh, yeah. Especially our trumpet player and our bass player. They're quite busy. They're in a lot of different bands. Yeah,
I
Ed,
mean,
our trumpet player, he has a James Bond tribute band or orchestra, and
James
he's actually
Bond themed tribute band. I love it.
yeah,
Goldfinger and stuff like that.
yes, and he's actually working with symphony orchestras. He arranged just about every James Bond theme song you can think of for the full orchestras, and that's been keeping him busy.
Or is he recording those?
Well, no, I mean it's the same music. There's no point really. But
What, just no market for it?
well, I mean, it's the same music, so the it's already recorded.
Yeah, yeah.
If you know what I mean, you could re-record it, but you don't own any of the music, so the licensing's a kind of a nightmare. And
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. But it's played live, which is great.
yeah.
Yeah,
So that's one thing he's doing, but he's in a whole bunch of other bands, and Chris, our bass player too, he's in a whole bunch of different bands too. Some more commercially oriented than others, but yeah, to each his own.
do you play in any other band yourself? Or do other
Right
gigs?
now, I'm just concentrating on my own bands. Atlantis, Soul Jazz on hiatus. I have another band called Cinephonic that I told you about for more soundtracky kind of oriented stuff.
It's what oriented?
Kind of cinematic music, inspired
Cinematic.
by, say, Ennio Morricone or François de Roubaix or Michel Legrand,
Uh-huh.
that kind of stuff.
And
You
now,
should check it out.
are you playing that live?
We've done live shows with that one as well. Kind of reduced though. On the albums, you'll see there's like 15, 20 musicians, but live I try to get it to something a little more manageable, 4 or 5 musicians.
I have a hard time understanding how a big band ever even holds together.
Mm.
It must be hard.
It's tricky, and especially you have strings involved and all that to get the right balance, especially with drum kits and all that. It's tricky balancing it all.
Yeah. So, what's your next album going to be? Let's make it up together. The X Suite has to be some kind of suite, right?
Yeah. Right now I'm working. It might not be called Atlantis though. It might not be for Atlantis, but my whole life, all the albums I've put out have always had a lot of horns. Have always been quintets or bigger, so fairly large ensembles. And this next one, I'd like for the first time to do something smaller and more intimate, maybe trio or
Like a
something
trio.
like that. Yeah. I've never done it, so
Really?
yeah, it feels like it's about time. And 25 years into my career.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, I always find that interesting. Sometimes you find someone doing a trio. I mean, Bill Evans played in larger groups a few times, but mostly it was the trio for years and
Yep.
years and years. That's all he did,
Yep.
basically. But
You have guys like Duke Ellington, which was always associated with the big band. But then later on in his life, when he started doing trio or solo things, you realize, oh my God, this guy was a great piano player. What a great way of thinking about the piano, because he has such an orchestral approach to the piano. Or even like Sun Ra, he's always associated with the orchestra. But when you hear him play alone, you're like, wow, that's pretty cool. So yeah, I'll give that a shot.
yeah, really. So it would just be bass, drums, piano, or keyboards?
Yeah, piano, vibraphone, maybe jazz guitar too. Yeah.
Yeah. Have you had a guitarist in your band?
I also play jazz guitar, so I
You have no talent at all, for God's sakes.
I haven't
Really?
had an outside jazz guitarist. Yeah, no. Oh, I've played all sorts of things. I've played everything from harp to accordion to all sorts of stuff, all sorts of percussion and stuff.
Well, yeah, you're a true musician, Pierre. You really are. You can write, you can play, you can compose a lot of different things. That's that's really great. Really great that you're lucky to have had that background and
Yeah, I'm
to
kind of a
get
jack
into
of
it.
all trades. I'm not really a virtuoso at any one instrument, but
Right,
I'm
right.
good enough to be able to express my ideas the way I need them to be. So it
Yeah,
serves my purposes, you know? Yeah.
that's
If I
great.
played like Oscar Peterson at, I'm not sure I would do anything differently, you know?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Did you ever meet Oscar?
I actually played, he was honored by the Governor General of Canada. I guess it was for the Order of Canada or something like that. And I played with a jazz trio as he was, yeah, for the ceremony. That was nerve wracking. I heard that Oscar could be really particular about other pianists, and if he doesn't like what you're playing, he'll tell you to stop playing, like literally. So I was playing, and he was getting wheeled by in a wheelchair, and he looked at me and he just gave me a nod. He just went, and I was like, "I'm okay."
Wow, isn't that interesting?
Yeah, that was something.
Yeah, he may be the most famous Canadian jazz musician, huh?
Probably Gil Evans, Oscar Peterson. Yeah.
Oscar Peterson was. I'm blanking out. What did he play? Oh,
Piano?
wait a second. Of course, he's the piano player. I'm thinking ahead of myself. Who was the other one
Mm-hmm.
you mentioned?
Gil Evans?
Oh, Gil Evans. Of
Yeah.
course. Yeah, he was Canadian.
Yeah. Toronto.
I love his stuff, especially Into the Cool.
Yeah. 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 Uh, I mean, I love everything he's done. His albums with Miles Davis are
And
incredible.
yeah, Sketches of Spain and oh my God,
Miles Ahead. Yeah.
I know. Porgy and Bess. I
Mm-hmm.
also like his individual albums. You know, I got
Yeah. Yeah.
into
Yeah.
collecting. I got into collecting albums. If I liked an album, I bought all their albums,
Yeah.
just everything. You know,
Yeah.
so I've seen a wide selection of these things.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So what's the future for you, sir?
Keep on keeping on.
Keep on keeping on, just doing what you're doing, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
love
Like
it.
I said, I'm writing right now and working on a new album. I'm not sure what it's going to be called yet, but I'll let you know.
Right. Okay, good. You know, so if you were to give advice to a budding musician, if he wanted to be successful, let's say the baseline is you got to have some talent, you got to have
Mm-hmm.
some drive, you got to have the basic ability to do it. What's the recommendation you would give to them above all else?
Yeah. Find your passion and take massive action. Like you really got to give it all you got. And if you're going to be a musician, do it. Don't be half-assed about it. You know. Uh,
Yeah.
I remember when I was first starting out as a musician, I was working full time in a call center, and struggling doing gigs here and there. And eventually, I just said, "Screw it! I'm going to be a musician. I'm going to do it, and I'm going to make it work." And so I quit the call center and just decided I'm going to take the plunge. And yeah, and it's important not to ignore the creative musical aspect of it all, but also the whole marketing, selling yourself, that whole side of things either. So yeah, that's what I'd say. Give it all
Yeah.
you got.
Yeah, that's good advice for anybody who's on their own. It's just yeah. I went all in on my business at a certain point. I discovered I
Yeah.
wasn't employable.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't like to work for other people.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah,
just,
working in an office 9 to 5, oh, it drove me nuts.
oh my God, terrible. So, yeah, it's, if you're successful and if you stick with it and if you love it, it's the best lifestyle in the world, doing your own thing, creating your
Yeah,
own thing.
you never work a day in your life if you do what you love, you know?
Yeah. I bet you've read a bit of motivational literature about stuff like this.
No,
Not
but
really?
you pick things up here and there. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because I've heard that saying. Yeah. You never work a day in your life if you're doing what you love.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, I certainly love what you're doing. I
Oh,
will
thanks,
listen to
Robert.
your music till the day I die. And I look forward to hearing more of it in the coming years. And I wish you just all the success in the world. You deserve it. You're
Yeah,
getting it.
thanks a lot, Robert.
And just thank you very much for what you're doing. You're making a difference in the world. You really are.
No, thank you so much. That's really nice.